All right, I'm gonna give my unsolicited opinion on using saliva versus water to mix Kambo medicine on a stick. So in the jungle, they use saliva, right? That makes sense. They don't really have access to fresh, clean water, and so that would be the most convenient thing that they could use. But in the West, a lot of people like to use purified water. So my opinion is that water is the better way to go, because yes, I understand that they do things a certain way in the jungle, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best way to do it. And you also have to look at the context of, well, why would they use saliva? Because they don't have an alternative. The alternative would be, river water, which is probably far more likely to infect your burn than saliva. Whereas purified drinking water is going to be a much more sterile and clean option than somebody's saliva. So, you're putting your spit saturated frog secretion into a person's wound, and there's all sorts of opportunity for infection and bacteria and transference to happen. And so I personally don't really endorse the use of saliva. I don't really care if it's traditional. It was also traditional to, shit in the jungle and eat monkeys and have 3 wives, and I don't see anyone rushing to adopt those traditions as well. So my personal preference is use purified water. Don't use chlorinated water because that could perhaps damage the peptides. Use some water that would be suitable for drinking, whether it be RO or mineral or bottled water, whatever you have access to. And I also want to note too that I do feel that energetically and spiritually, when you use your saliva, part of you is going into that person's body, and for better or worse, you're going to be more connected to their experience in the medicine. And as a practitioner, in my peak, I was serving 400 times a year. I couldn't afford to be that connected to everybody that I was serving. So part of it is also protecting yourself energetically by not using your saliva to, be connected to them in that way. I know sometimes people will have the client use their own saliva. That I'm more okay with, as long as they're not spitting on a stick that everybody's using. And then you just have a bunch of people spit on the stick. But overall, I would say just use water. We live in a blessed situation where most of us have access to clean water. So let's take advantage of that. And there's a lot of benefits that come to that, like not having bacteria from someone's spit being pressed into our burns. So that's my opinion. It might ruffle some feathers, but I do think that using water is appropriate for a more modern adaptation of how to use Kambo.